In the annals of history, few names evoke as much fear and intrigue as Al-Qaeda. Join us on an unprecedented journey through the formation, ideology, and devastating impact of Al-Qaeda. From its birth in 1988 to the earth-shattering 9/11 attacks and beyond, this is the story of a terrorist organization that shook the world. Act 1. The formation of Al-Qaeda. In 1988, Osama bin Laden founded Al-Qaeda, a militant extremist organization with a primary objective of promoting radical Islamic ideologies and conducting jihad against what it perceived as enemies of Islam, particularly the United States and its allies. Al-Qaeda became a global hub for like-minded militants, drawing individuals from various parts of the world who shared its extremist beliefs. Central to Al-Qaeda's ideology was the belief in the establishment of a strict form of Islamic governance, or a caliphate, based on their interpretation of Islamic law. They viewed Western nations, especially the United States, as the primary obstacles to achieving this goal. Bin Laden and his followers believed that they had a religious duty to wage violent jihad to remove these perceived impediments and defend what they considered the Muslim world from Western influence. Afghanistan served as a significant location for Al-Qaeda's activities. During the Afghan-Soviet War in the 1980s, the United States and other Western countries had supported Afghan resistance fighters, including bin Laden, in their fight against the Soviet Union. After the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, bin Laden and Al-Qaeda established a presence in the country, where they found sanctuary and forged connections with local extremist groups. Al-Qaeda's global reach and influence grew as it attracted individuals from various countries, some of whom received training and indoctrination at Al-Qaeda camps in Afghanistan. These individuals became part of a network of extremists dedicated to carrying out acts of terrorism in the name of Al-Qaeda's ideology. Act 2. Declaration of War. In 1996, Osama bin Laden issued his first fatwa, or religious edict, in which he officially declared war on the United States and its allies. This significant declaration marked the beginning of Al-Qaeda's campaign of terrorism against Western targets. Bin Laden's fatwa cited several reasons for his declaration of war. Firstly, he expressed outrage over the presence of American troops in Saudi Arabia, which he considered a desecration of Islamic Holy Land. This presence had long been a source of discontent among extremists, and bin Laden saw it as a direct affront to the Islamic faith. Secondly, bin Laden's fatwa highlighted U.S. support for Israel, which he viewed as an extension of American aggression in the Middle East. His opposition to U.S. policies in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict further fueled his determination to wage jihad against the United States. Additionally, bin Laden's declaration of war was driven by a broader set of grievances, including what he saw as the corrupting influence of Western culture and values on Muslim societies, as well as perceived Western exploitation of Muslim resources. This fatwa marked the official commencement of Al-Qaeda's terrorist campaign against Western targets. It was a declaration of intent to use violence and terrorism as a means to achieve Al-Qaeda's objectives, including the establishment of strict Islamic governance and the removal of perceived Western influence from Muslim-majority countries. Act 3. Attacks of Al-Qaeda. Throughout the late 1990s, Al-Qaeda gained notoriety for its deadly terrorist attacks, which showcased the group's increasing reach and the sophistication of its planning and execution. One of the notable acts of terrorism during this period was the simultaneous bombings of the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in 1998. These attacks resulted in significant loss of life and widespread destruction. They demonstrated Al-Qaeda's ability to coordinate simultaneous attacks on multiple targets in different countries, underscoring the transnational nature of the threat posed by the group. Another significant attack occurred in 2000 when the USS Cole, a U.S. Navy destroyer, was targeted in a suicide bombing in the port of Aden, Yemen. The attack resulted in casualties among American sailors and further highlighted Al-Qaeda's capacity to strike military assets of the United States and its allies. These acts of terrorism were characterized by meticulous planning, well-coordinated execution, and a willingness to use suicide bombers, all of which indicated Al-Qaeda's growing operational capabilities. As Al-Qaeda gained notoriety through these attacks, it raised global concerns about the reach and capabilities of extremist organizations. The international community began to recognize the need for enhanced cooperation and intelligence sharing to counter the evolving threat posed by Al-Qaeda and similar terrorist groups. Act 4. 9/11 Attacks. On September 11, 2001, Al-Qaeda executed its most infamous and devastating act of terrorism. 19 Al-Qaeda terrorists hijacked 4 commercial airliners, using them as weapons to carry out suicide attacks on high-profile targets in the United States. 2 of the hijacked planes were flown into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City. The impact and subsequent fires caused the iconic skyscrapers to collapse, resulting in catastrophic loss of life and immense destruction. These attacks were a horrifying and unprecedented act of mass terrorism on U.S. soil. A third hijacked plane crashed into the Pentagon, the headquarters of the United States Department of Defense, located in Arlington, Virginia. The attack on the Pentagon resulted in significant damage and casualties. The fourth hijacked plane, United Airlines Flight 93, crashed into a field in Pennsylvania after passengers bravely attempted to regain control of the aircraft from the terrorists. Their courageous actions prevented another potential target from being struck, but the crash resulted in the loss of all on board. In total, nearly 3,000 innocent people from various countries lost their lives in the 9/11 attacks. Act 5. Global War on Terror. Following the devastating 9/11 terrorist attacks in 2001, the United States initiated what would become known as the Global War on Terror. The primary objective was to dismantle the Al-Qaeda terrorist network responsible for the attacks and remove the Taliban regime in Afghanistan, which had provided a safe haven for Al-Qaeda. To achieve these goals, the U.S. military, alongside coalition partners, launched an invasion of Afghanistan. The initial phase of the conflict aimed to dislodge the Taliban from power and disrupt Al-Qaeda's operations. This effort was largely successful, leading to the collapse of the Taliban regime. However, what was initially expected to be a relatively short and focused military operation evolved into a protracted and complex conflict. The United States and its allies found themselves engaged in a nation-building effort in Afghanistan, attempting to establish a stable government, rebuild infrastructure, and provide security in the war-torn country. The war in Afghanistan had far-reaching consequences for both Afghanistan and the United States. On the Afghan side, the conflict resulted in a protracted and unstable security situation, with the Taliban insurgency regaining strength over the years. Civilian casualties were high, and the country continued to grapple with issues of governance and security long after the initial invasion. For the United States, the war had significant financial, human, and geopolitical costs. It became the longest-running conflict in U.S. history, stretching over 2 decades. The financial burden was substantial, and the toll on U.S. military personnel and their families was profound. Moreover, the war on terror led to changes in U.S. foreign policy, including a focus on counterterrorism efforts and a re-evaluation of military engagements abroad. Act 6. Al-Qaeda in our time. In the modern era, Al-Qaeda persists as a loosely affiliated network of extremist groups with a global presence. These regional affiliates share the core Al-Qaeda ideology but operate with a degree of autonomy, conducting a range of activities such as planning and executing attacks, disseminating propaganda, and recruiting new members. While the death of Osama bin Laden in 2011 was a significant blow to the core leadership, Al-Qaeda adapted by fostering a more decentralized structure. This decentralization has allowed it to weather counterterrorism efforts and maintain a global reach. Al-Qaeda's regional affiliates, including groups like Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, have become increasingly influential in shaping the organization's activities. Al-Qaeda's enduring presence underscores the ongoing challenges in countering extremist ideologies and terrorist networks in the contemporary world. Despite the emergence of other extremist organizations like ISIS, Al-Qaeda remains a persistent threat to global security. Its longevity highlights the complex nature of the struggle against terrorism and the need for sustained efforts in intelligence, military operations, diplomacy, and countering extremist propaganda. In the modern era, the fight against Al-Qaeda serves as a reminder of the ongoing battle against terrorism and the need for vigilance and cooperation among nations to address the evolving threats.